Every parent dreams of watching their child succeed. Good grades, a college acceptance letter, a future that feels secure. But in Riverton, Illinois, that dream collapsed in the most unthinkable way. Because one afternoon, inside a quiet college office, administrators answered what should have been a routine phone call. At first, the voice on the other end was calm. Then, a scream, a heavy thud, then another. The unmistakable sound of someone being attacked. Live, over speakerphone, the administrators shouted into the phone, asking if everything was okay. There was no response, only screaming, then silence. When the call connected again, a woman answered and said calmly, "Yes, this is Margaret." But it wasn't Margaret. It was her daughter. And by the time the truth came out, a mother was already dead. The Carter family lived on a quiet, tree-lined street in Riverton, Illinois. The kind of neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to happen. Porches were decorated for the seasons. Neighbors waved when they passed. Doors were often left unlocked. Inside one of those homes lived Margaret Carter, her husband Daniel, and their only child, Emily. From the outside, their life looked calm, stable, predictable, and for years it had been. Margaret was the emotional center of the household. She remembered birthdays, checked in with everyone's feelings, handled conflict gently, carefully. Daniel, by contrast, was steady and practical. He worked long hours, paid the bills, and trusted that when it came to emotional matters, Margaret had everything under control. Together, they believed they had done something right, because Emily had never given them a reason to worry. Margaret Carter wasn't famous. She didn't have a large social media presence or a dramatic backstory. But to the families who passed through Riverton Children's Hospital, she was unforgettable. After graduating from Lakeview University, Margaret spent nearly 3 decades working as a pediatric support specialist in the hospital's oncology wing. She was the person families leaned on when the diagnosis was devastating, when parents were overwhelmed, when children were afraid, when hope felt fragile. Margaret had a gift for staying calm in moments of crisis. She listened more than she spoke. She never rushed grief. And she believed, deeply, that patience and honesty mattered, especially when things went wrong. At home, she carried those same values into her parenting. She didn't yell. She didn't interrogate. She trusted. Emily Carter grew up hearing the same description over and over again. She's such a good kid. At St. Augustine Preparatory School, she earned strong grades without much drama. She wasn't the loudest student. She wasn't the most competitive. She did what was expected, and she did it quietly. Teachers praised her maturity. Coaches praised her reliability. Margaret and Daniel praised her independence. So when it came time to think about college, no one panicked. They sat around the kitchen table, discussing options. Emily wanted something close to home, somewhere manageable, somewhere she wouldn't feel lost. That's when North Valley College entered the picture. A small private school about an hour away. A manageable campus. Smaller class sizes. A sense of structure. When Emily earned a presidential academic scholarship, it felt like confirmation. Everything was going according to plan. But pressure doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it grows quietly. Emily arrived on campus in the fall with optimism. New classes, new routines, new expectations. But within weeks, she felt something unfamiliar. Overwhelmed. Classes moved faster than she expected. Professors didn't check in. Deadlines stacked on top of each other. Emily fell behind. Not all at once. One missed assignment. One poor exam grade. One class she told herself she would catch up on later. But later never came. Instead of asking for help, Emily retreated. She skipped office hours, ignored emails, stopped checking grades. Every setback felt temporary, until it wasn't. By the end of the semester, Emily had failed 3 out of 4 classes. And the future she had been promising her parents no longer existed. In December, a certified letter arrived. Emily signed for it herself. Inside was a formal notice from North Valley College. She had been academically suspended. Effective immediately, she was no longer enrolled. Her scholarship was void. Her access to campus housing would be terminated. The letter outlined options. Appeals. Counseling. Next steps. Emily read every word. Then she folded the letter and put it away. She didn't call her parents. She didn't ask for help. She made a decision instead. No one can know. When spring semester began, Emily returned to the area around campus. But she wasn't a student anymore. She paid for cheap motel rooms in cash, moved frequently, packed light. To friends, she said she was figuring things out. To her parents, she said nothing at all. Margaret texted often. How are classes going? Are you keeping up with your grades? Remember, the scholarship depends on it. Emily always responded the same way. Everything's fine. Each lie made the next one easier, and the truth harder to escape. For weeks, the Carter household remained calm. Margaret continued her shifts at the hospital. Daniel went to work each morning. Emily maintained the illusion that everything was normal. But lies rarely exist in isolation. They create pressure, and pressure leaks. Daniel Carter was the first to notice something subtle, but unsettling. He was reviewing finances one evening when he realized something didn't add up. The family's college savings plan hadn't covered everything for the semester, as expected. So Daniel decided to log into North Valley College's online portal to check the balance. The system rejected him, again and again. At first, he assumed it was a technical issue, but when he tried resetting the password, nothing worked. Confused, he called Emily. She answered quickly. Too quickly. Daniel explained the problem. Emily didn't hesitate. There must be a mistake on their end, she said. They've been having system issues. Her tone was casual, reassuring, and because Emily had never given him a reason not to trust her, Daniel believed her. Still, a small seed of doubt had been planted. A few days later, Margaret sent Emily a message she didn't realize would take on new meaning. Why do I always feel like you're scamming me? Just remember, you need to keep your grades up to keep your scholarship. It was meant half-jokingly. Margaret smiled as she typed it. Emily responded almost instantly. My grades are good. Thank you very much. Margaret stared at the screen for a moment longer than usual. Something about the response felt defensive. But doubt is easy to dismiss when trust has been built over years. Margaret told herself she was overthinking it. She always had been the more sensitive one. On the morning of March 4th, Daniel was at work when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. He answered anyway. The voice on the other end identified themselves as an administrator from North Valley College. They said they needed to speak with him urgently about Emily. Daniel's stomach tightened. The administrator explained, carefully and professionally, that Emily was no longer enrolled at the college. Daniel didn't understand. No longer enrolled? He repeated. What do you mean? There was a pause. We can't discuss details, the administrator said. You'll need to speak with your daughter. Daniel asked one more question. How long has this been the case? Another pause. You'll need to ask her. The call ended. Daniel sat at his desk in silence. Daniel opened the family location sharing app. Emily's location appeared instantly. She was at home. That didn't make sense. It was early afternoon. She should have been at class, or at least near campus. Without thinking further, Daniel grabbed his keys and left work. He made one unusual decision before leaving. He left his phone behind. He didn't want Emily to see his location moving toward home. He didn't want her to avoid the conversation that now had to happen. Daniel arrived home just after 11:30 a.m. Emily was alone in the house. She looked surprised, but not panicked to see him. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse her. He told her what the college had said. Emily's response came quickly. She admitted she was struggling. She said classes were hard. She said she was still attending some lectures. She said she just needed time. Daniel listened. He told her something she had probably needed to hear for months. We'll get through this. He told her she didn't need to have everything figured out. That taking time off wasn't a failure. That disappointing them wasn't the end of the world. Emily cried. She told him she felt lost, that all her friends seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Daniel believed the worst was over. He believed honesty had finally arrived. Daniel suggested they call Margaret. Margaret answered from work. She listened quietly as Daniel explained the situation. She didn't panic. She didn't blame. She told Emily she was proud of her for speaking up. Margaret decided to leave work early and come home. She wanted to talk face to face. She wanted to help. Daniel made a decision he would later replay endlessly in his mind. He left the house before Margaret arrived. He believed Emily needed time with her mother. Margaret was better at emotional conversations. Margaret could fix this. Daniel returned to work. Over the next hour, he and Margaret exchanged messages, updates, reassurances. At 12:41 p.m., Daniel sent Margaret a final text. "What did you talk about?" Margaret never replied. Earlier that day, Margaret had left a voicemail with North Valley College, asking to discuss Emily's academic status. That voicemail was returned shortly after she arrived home. Margaret answered the phone. At the college, two administrators sat at a desk. The call was placed on speaker. At first, everything sounded normal. Introductions were made. Then, a scream, loud, sharp, terrified. Then a heavy thud, followed by another, and another. The administrators froze. They shouted into the phone, "Margaret, are you okay? What's happening?" There was no response, only screaming, and the sound of air being forced violently from someone's lungs. They could hear it clearly. Someone was being attacked, live. Then the call disconnected. The administrators tried calling back. Once, no answer. Twice, no answer. On the third attempt, the phone connected. A voice answered, "Yes, this is Margaret." But the voice was wrong. Both administrators recognized it instantly. It belonged to Emily. One of them spoke carefully. "I don't think this is Margaret." There was silence. Then the call ended. The administrators didn't hesitate. They called police immediately. They reported what they had heard. Screaming, thuds, a call that ended abruptly. Officers were dispatched to the Carter home. Lights and sirens cut through the quiet streets of Riverton. Before police arrived, Emily attempted to control the narrative. She broke a window. She told a story about a break-in. She said her mother had told her to run. But the scene didn't match the story. Blood was visible on the outside of the house. Glass patterns were wrong. Nothing added up. Daniel was still at work when he received a call from a friend in law enforcement. Police units were being dispatched to his home. Daniel tried calling the house. Emily answered. She was hysterical. She repeated the break-in story. Daniel could do nothing but wait. Officers arrived at the Carter home within minutes. Emily was found outside, crying, shaking, then suddenly quiet as officers entered the house. The truth became impossible to ignore. When officers stepped inside the Carter home, the air felt heavy. Not chaotic, not frantic, heavy. The kind of stillness that settles only after something irreversible has happened. They followed the sound of Emily's sobbing briefly, then moved deeper into the house, down the hallway, into the master bedroom. That's where they found Margaret Carter. She lay on the floor, motionless. Blood had soaked into the carpet beneath her. Nearby, investigators would later note, were two objects that did not belong together in a crime scene, but often do in family tragedies. A cast iron skillet and a kitchen knife. Ordinary household items. Items Margaret herself had likely used countless times to cook meals for her family. Now, they were evidence. The medical examiner's findings would later paint a clear picture. Margaret Carter had suffered multiple blunt force injuries to the head. The force had been severe, repeated. After the initial blows, she had been stabbed repeatedly in the neck, at least 20 times. Defensive wounds were visible on her arms and hands. Margaret had tried to protect herself. She had been conscious. She had known who was attacking her. This wasn't a single impulsive strike. It was sustained and deeply personal. Outside, Emily's behavior shifted dramatically. At first, she cried uncontrollably. Her words came fast and jumbled. Then, almost suddenly, she stopped speaking altogether. She lowered herself to the ground, curled inward, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She did not respond to questions. She did not react to movement. Officers described her as catatonic, silent, as if her mind had finally caught up to what her body had done. Daniel comes home. Daniel Carter arrived home to flashing lights, police tape, strangers standing in his yard. He asked one question before anyone could stop him. "Where's my wife?" No answer prepared him for what came next. In a matter of minutes, Daniel lost the life he had known, his partner, his home, his sense of safety, and the belief that love alone could protect a family from everything. In the days that followed, investigators pieced together the timeline. Emily's academic suspension, The motel stays, the lies, the confrontation, the phone call, the attempt to stage a break-in. Every step suggested planning. Not long-term planning, but deliberate decision-making in the moment. And that distinction would matter later. There was never any dispute that Emily Carter killed her mother. The question was why. And more importantly, did she understand what she was doing? Emily's attorneys centered their case on mental health. They argued that Emily had suffered a psychotic break, that the pressure of failure, the fear of disappointing her parents, the collapse of her identity as a successful student, had fractured her perception of reality. They pointed to her catatonic state after the attack, her claimed memory gaps, her inability to describe the event clearly. 3 psychological experts testified on her behalf. They suggested underlying psychiatric disorders, possibly undiagnosed, possibly exacerbated by stress, possibly severe enough to impair judgment at the moment of the attack. According to expert testimony, Emily claimed her last memory before the attack was sitting on the couch with her mother. Margaret was comforting her, telling her everything would be okay. Emily said she remembered standing up, walking toward the basement, and then, nothing. Her next memory, she said, was waking up in the hospital. The prosecution saw it differently. They acknowledged Emily's distress. They acknowledged fear, but they argued that fear was not the same as psychosis. They pointed to her actions after the killing, breaking the window, impersonating her mother, repeating a fabricated story. Those were not the actions of someone disconnected from reality. Those were the actions of someone trying to avoid consequences. To reinforce this, the prosecution called their own clinical psychologist. She testified that Emily showed traits consistent with borderline personality features and anxiety disorder, not psychosis, not schizophrenia, and crucially, she stated that Emily appeared to be exaggerating symptoms during evaluations. Throughout the trial, Daniel Carter sat quietly. He did not glare. He did not react. He listened. He absorbed. He lived inside every moment being dissected in public. Letters were submitted to the court. Friends, colleagues, people who had known Margaret, who described her patience, her kindness, her unwavering support for her daughter. The woman Emily had killed was the same woman who would have forgiven her. That irony hung over the courtroom like a weight. After deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty on all counts: purposeful murder, felony assault, tampering with evidence. The courtroom was silent. Emily showed little reaction. Daniel closed his eyes. Justice, in legal terms, had been served, but nothing felt resolved. On sentencing day, Emily Carter stood before the judge. She was no longer the promising college student, no longer the daughter with a scholarship. She was an offender. The judge acknowledged the complexity of the case, the mental health arguments, the tragedy, but he returned to the facts, the severity of the violence, the attempt to cover it up, the need to protect the public. Emily was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. She would be nearly 40 years old before becoming eligible for parole. She was informed of her right to appeal. She said little. After the trial ended, the Carter home sat quietly. The same walls, the same rooms, but none of the warmth. Daniel eventually left Riverton. The house was sold. Margaret's colleagues at the hospital held a memorial. Patients' families shared stories about kindness, about comfort, about the woman who had once held their hand through their worst moments. At the heart of this tragedy was a lie. Not about grades, but about fear. Emily believed failure would cost her everything. She believed disappointment was unbearable. But the truth, the most painful truth of all, was this. The people she feared disappointing were the ones who would have helped her survive it. This wasn't a story about college, or scholarships, or academic pressure alone. It was a story about silence, about what happens when fear replaces honesty, and when the need to appear successful becomes more important than being safe. One family, one lie, one irreversible moment, in a quiet house that will never feel like home again.